Around 1200 BCE, something extraordinary happened across the Mediterranean. The mighty Hittite Empire collapsed. Mycenaean palaces burned. Ugarit, one of the richest trading cities in the ancient world, was abandoned forever. Within a few decades, the Bronze Age world as people knew it had ended. The only detailed account of what happened comes from Egyptian records describing mysterious invaders they called the Sea Peoples. And after 150 years of archaeological investigation, we still don't know who they really were. The only survivors who could write left us one terrifying clue: stone carvings showing massive naval battles against warriors who looked like they came from everywhere and nowhere at once. Feathered helmets, horned headgear, ships with curved prows unlike anything seen before. The Egyptian pharaoh Ramesses III had these scenes carved into his temple walls, not as decoration, but as documentary evidence of humanity's closest brush with total collapse. But here's what will make your blood run cold. The Egyptians were the only major civilization that survived. Everyone else gone, and we still don't know who these mysterious attackers really were or where they came from. Here's what makes this mystery so gripping. The Egyptian records tell us the Sea Peoples weren't typical raiders. The stone carvings show something unprecedented: men, women, and children traveling together. Entire families were on the move. But families don't usually launch coordinated military campaigns across the Mediterranean. So what were they really? The Egyptians gave them names that sound like whispers from a lost world: the Peliset, the Shekelesh, the Denian. Some of these names echo through history. The Peliset might be the biblical Philistines, the Shekelesh could be connected to Sicily. But others vanished completely, leaving only their names carved in Egyptian stone. But here's where our skin starts to crawl. At Ugarit, one of the richest cities in the ancient world, archaeologists found cuneiform tablets that read like horror movie scripts. "Enemy ships have been sighted at sea," one message screams. "Send military aid immediately," pleads another. These weren't war preparations. These were final desperate calls for help. And then there's the discovery that defies explanation. City after city, abandoned without a fight. Meals left half-eaten. Treasure buried in panic but never retrieved. Entire populations who saw something coming and ran, but ran from what? What terror was so absolute that people chose to flee rather than defend their homes? The battle scenes carved into Ramesses III's temple walls are like ancient action movies frozen in stone. Warriors, with feathered headdresses, clash with soldiers in horned helmets. Strange ships with curved prows battle Egyptian vessels in the Nile Delta. But here's what makes your skin crawl. These aren't artistic imagination. They're documentary evidence of a real fight for survival. Look closer at these carvings, and you'll see something that shouldn't exist. The Sea People's equipment comes from everywhere: Mediterranean helmets, Aegean weapons, ships designed like nothing the Egyptians had ever seen. It's as if warriors from a dozen different cultures had somehow united under one banner. But how? Why? The Egyptian records describe two massive battles, one on land, one at sea. Egypt claims total victory in both. But here's the detail that changes everything. Immediately after these victories, Egyptian power began to decline. Trade routes collapsed. The empire started shrinking. Does that sound like the aftermath of a glorious triumph? And then there's the most haunting question of all. If Egypt truly crushed the Sea Peoples, why do the reliefs show the battle as so desperately close? Egyptian art usually depicted enemies as tiny figures being trampled by giant pharaohs. But these carvings show evenly matched forces locked in brutal combat. The Egyptians carved these scenes to celebrate victory, but what they actually recorded looks more like barely surviving catastrophe. Here's the detail that will make you question everything. At site after site where the Sea Peoples supposedly struck, archaeologists find almost nothing. No arrowheads, no burned buildings, no mass graves. It's like ghost attacks, devastating consequences with barely any physical evidence. How do you destroy a civilization and leave almost no trace? unless they weren't destroying anything at all. After their clash with Egypt, the Sea Peoples seemed to dissolve back into the shadows of history. But here's where the story takes a fascinating turn. Some of them didn't disappear at all. They became our neighbors. The Philistines, yes, the same ones from biblical stories, were almost certainly descendants of the Sea Peoples. Their pottery, their burial customs, even their cooking techniques all appear suddenly in the archaeological record right after the Sea Peoples' encounters with Egypt. It's like watching a magic trick in reverse. Mysterious invaders becoming familiar historical peoples. But that just makes the other groups more mysterious. Where did the Shekelesh go? The Denin? The Weshesh? Did they settle somewhere beyond the reach of ancient record keepers? Are their descendants living among us today, completely unaware of their ancestors' role in reshaping the ancient world? Here's the twist that makes this mystery truly haunting. The Sea Peoples might not have been conquerors at all. Picture this: climate change causing massive droughts, trade networks collapsing, governments failing, desperate populations streaming across the Mediterranean looking for new homes. Some become pirates out of necessity. Others find empty lands to settle. Most just try to survive. The Egyptian records might have gotten it backwards. Instead of mysterious invaders destroying civilization, we might be looking at civilization's collapse, creating mysterious refugees. The Sea Peoples weren't the storm. They were people caught in the storm. Here's the final twist that will haunt you. We may never solve this mystery because the Sea Peoples themselves might not have known who they were. Picture the chaos: climate disasters forcing mass migrations, trade routes collapsing overnight, governments failing, desperate groups of refugees from different cultures finding themselves traveling together, fighting together, surviving together. They weren't the Sea Peoples. They were just people trying not to die. The Egyptian scribes gave them that name because they needed an enemy to blame. But what if there was no unified enemy? What if the Bronze Age collapse created so much chaos that dozens of different displaced groups just merged into something new and terrifying? This means the Sea Peoples mystery might be unsolvable by design. We're looking for the identity of people who may have lost their own identities in the chaos of civilizational collapse. They became something that had never existed before and would never exist again, a temporary alliance of the desperate. And that leads to the most chilling realization of all: some of the Sea Peoples are still with us. The Philistines settled down and became part of history we recognize. But the others? They're out there somewhere. Your DNA might carry traces of the Shekelesh. Your neighbor might be descended from the Denian. The mysterious warriors who helped end the Bronze Age didn't vanish. They became us. The Sea Peoples aren't just an ancient mystery. They're a mirror showing us what happens when the world breaks apart and people have to reinvent themselves to survive. And somewhere in that reflection, we might just recognize ourselves. So here's our question for you. If you discovered tomorrow that your ancestry traced back to one of these mysterious Sea Peoples, which group would you want it to be? The Philistines who found new homes? The Shekelesh who vanished into legend? Or would you rather be descended from the Egyptians who barely survived their onslaught? Drop your choice in the comments and tell us why. We're genuinely curious which part of this mystery grabs you most. And if you're hungry for more ancient mysteries where the truth is stranger than fiction, that Vanished Civilizations playlist is calling your name. Hit subscribe and click the notification bell, because we're just getting started unraveling history's greatest unsolved puzzles.